Hello, everybody. I'm Developer Relations Engineer David Jones-Gilardi, and right now I want to take you on a fun journey of something I have been personally working on for a little while now, kind of off and on, right? So a while ago, I had set off on this adventure, if you will, to build an adventure game. You know, I'm kind of a kid of the days when the Zork text-based adventure game was a thing. There were so many of these types of games back then. I also was an avid reader and absolutely loved things like choose your own adventure stories. And with the advent of generational AI and the agentic AI capabilities that we have today, I was like, man, I want to create something like this, but using AI and the tools that we have at our disposal. And I'm finally ready after a lot of kind of going back and forth to show this to everybody. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got. So the basic buildup is this, right? I had started off building an adventure game using Langflow, and using Langflow to like generate my worlds. And then I originally had, and I still have, this is the interface that you see here all the way on the right. This game called MCP Player One or MC Player One. And the reason why I named it that way is because it is leveraging MCP. The other goal I had set out for myself in this was to build the game completely in MCP using MCP as an interface, because now with this proliferation of all of these various MCP based clients, you've got Claude Code, Claude Desktop, Cursor, Warp. I mean, there's so many of them out there that doesn't even scratch the surface, right? I was like, could we build a game that is playable through those interfaces, right? And then just recently, and what really triggered this particular video was that ElevenLabs released their conversational AI and then opened up this world to have potentially an audio interaction, almost like a playable audiobook. So this is the story of that journey, is really what it comes down to. So let's break it down and take a look at what's on the screen. So on the left-hand side, we have Langflow, which is my visual IDE for building out agentic and generative AI workflows. I'll get to the details of things there in a moment. In the middle, this portion here is ElevenLabs, right? So I have built a game agent, an adventure game agent, a voice agent here in ElevenLabs. And I got to give kudos to the ElevenLabs team. I think they've done a really nice job. Their SDK, their documentation was top notch. I was able to get the audio portion of this running really quite fast. So I'd already had the core of the game built, and I was able literally to add in the audio portion within like an hour to the actual game itself. And then what you see on the right hand side here is the website itself, right? At mcplayer1.onrender.com. This is where I have published this, and you can see if I scroll down, I've got a whole set of games that are in here. These are things that I've all built via Langflow and via the voice agent, and we'll go through that in a moment. So, matter of fact, the one I'm going to play today is at the bottom. I just created this. It's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game. Funny enough, I have a friend of mine who's playing it, I believe, right now. Yeah, hi, Aaron. Yeah, so now originally this was always intended to be text-based and to then have a multimodal capability within that. So my goal was to be able to play it in things like Warp and Cursor and stuff, but then also have images. That was one thing we did not have way back in the day when we were playing things like Zork. So what I'm going to do real quick is I've got Warp up here. And if you take a look at, Warp does have MCP support. So if I go to Warp settings into AI, and if I scroll down here to the manage MCP servers, you can see I've got MC Player 1. Now in the app itself, if I come back over to home, I'm going to take up some more real estate. You see I have this how to play. I have this section here, right? All of these are telling you, here are the config. Here's the config you need for Claude, for Cursor, right? And for Warp. So in Warp, I can just literally pop this in and go. So if we come back over to our friend Warp, right, you can see that I'm using that same SSE endpoint. So this is implemented with SSE. I built in an MCP server that handles everything. I'll show you some of the details of that in a moment. But here you can see all the various tools that we have at our disposal. So if I come over here and say, let's play an MC Player 1 game, right? Now, this is using a local agent, whatever agent that I'm using through Warp in this case to play the game. Now, I've turned it to go to auto approve. I feel like it flows a little bit better. This is one of the few times I'll do that because I'm not particularly worried about the agent going off the rails or something and doing something bad. It's just a game, right? So, okay, so what it's doing right now is it is looking at the available games. You can see this curl command. So I've got some rules in Warp that have set up to auto display images. So if I like click on these, you can see it's showing me the images, from these particular games. It gave me a sampling of like the first 3, and now it's saying, hey, here are the games that we have available. There we go. Which would you like to play? And so yeah, it gave me all this info. I'm gonna say let's play the Hitchhikers game. Now, for those of you who may not be as old as I am, you may never have played a text adventure before. For those of you who are, this might be a little bit of a throwback, right? So great, you can see it's starting the game. It just picked a username for me based off of my local environment, and yes, it is picking that. And see, we get this initial information. We can see that we have this image, right? So I created a game based on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If I open this up, that is clearly Arthur's house with the bulldozers. That's pretty. So this is actually part of the fun. So this is the part, the stuff you're seeing, the images and things like that, all of the text that is coming back here, the challenges, the items that you have. This is actually being created during the world generation phase. So when you come in here and if you ask it to create you a new game, which you can do, by the way, I can ask it, hey, create a game based off of like any theme. That's where it's actually going back to Langflow. Now in Langflow, all we have, honestly, is a simple agent, right? So we have a simple agentic flow. I've got my agent component here. I'm using GPT-4.1, which does a very nice job with these. I have minimal tools. I actually found that the agents themselves, the models, the newer models, actually do a really nice job of creating these worlds, right? I do have it hooked up. I have tools like the URL tool and the Tablet search one, just in case the agent needs more information. It can go and look out in the internet and find things if it needs it, but most of the time it really doesn't. So let's go ahead and take a look at this prompt. Now, I'm going to warn you, the prompt is chunky. Now, one thing I want to point out when you look at this prompt, for those of you, I know, it's a lot to read. I don't expect everyone to just read it right out of the gate. But you'll see that there are sections for each one of like generating rooms, the story itself, the challenges, the final challenge, all that kind of stuff. And all of this is about defining all of the various conditions and the types of guardrails and criteria that we have. If we didn't have AI, this would be something that you would code, right? So it's actually just kind of setting up the AI with the structure of what we expect. And at the very end, we also give it a big JSON blob. This JSON blob is the expected structure that the MC Player One application, when it's building out the world and when it's doing, this is what the structure it expects. Now, something that I think was actually kind of neat with the advent of some of the latest models, like again the GPT-4.1 series, a Claude 3.7 and things like that, they now do a very good job out of the gate of conforming to a JSON structure like this. So you'll notice that what I've done here is I've got this JSON blob that I'm saying, here's your example JSON. I want you to conform to this. And you'll notice that I'm using Langflow to inject it here into this JSON template variable. So if we take a look at that prompt again, you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see I have JSON template in curly braces, right? So I'm injecting that in there and I'm literally telling it, you must conform to this. Here is the template. I found GPT-4.1 to be excellent at this. Usually when using Langflow, I would use something like a structured output component. And I found that this was consistent enough, as in it is consistent every time. I didn't actually need to. So it was kind of interesting, a little bit different approach than I normally would have taken. But this is the world builder, right? So Langflow here is the world builder, and we have this exposed over MCP. But what about the rest of the actions in the game, right? So this is where our code comes into play. So for this actually gets into a bit of commentary here. And admittedly, this may not be the best approach. As a matter of fact, I am absolutely up for all of your feedback on that. But when I was building out this MCP based game, I found that I really had two major paths. I had this non-deterministic AI world building path, and then I had those very deterministic kind of database interaction type paths. Example, right? If you take a look over here in my routes, this is a Next.js app, by the way, you'll see that I have all these game routes, things like examine, help, kill, loot, move, start, take, things like that. the vast majority of these are really kind of like managing state and database interactions, right? Because as you're moving through the game world, your player is being stored in the database, and as you say, get an artifact, or as you get an item, or if you try to solve a challenge, well, all that stuff is being recorded and it's saving your state along the way. And what I found out, and it seems obvious now as I look back at it, but trying to use AI for most of those things was actually a big waste, right? I don't need to. I can just use database interactions to determine where you are at the game. And not only that, it's actually faster and costs me a lot less tokens. So I ended up having this kind of like dual MCP route where I've got an MCP server that is implementing all of these various routes. And then for world building, I have Langflow and the agentic AI portions doing that part. And those together in the single MCP server really come together really well. Now, speaking of the MCP server, another thing I had to learn was, well, how to properly implement one of those, especially since this application supports Claude, Cursor, Warp, ElevenLabs, whatever, anything that talks to MCP. It's supposed to be this universal interface. And there were a lot of learnings for me on that end as well. And one of those was this fun file here, this openapi.json. By the way, if you do searching for any of the MCP documentation, you will definitely run across this. But what I've learned here is that when agents go to talk to your MCP tools, they're going to reference this openapi.json along with the system prompt, actually, both of these things. And this is going to set the definition. This is how, when an agent connects up to the tools, it understands what it is, what it can do, and what its input and output like structure is, right? So if I scroll down here, you'll start to see these endpoints, right? These paths like API game start, right? API game state. And you'll see things like what's the summary, the description. And this is what the downstream agents are using to then discover all of the various tools. So if we come back over to Warp, right, and we come back to these settings here, again, you'll see all these little tools here, and the agent is able to auto-discover those and auto-discover, what they're for and everything. So the agent then determines what tool to use in what case. And you could actually see that happening, by the way, as we were coming down here. When I said, when I said, hey, let's play a game, it's like, oh, hey, I need to use list stories to find out what the games are, right? And then you can see it's getting this data back. This is actually coming back from the MCP server, right? So it's making these calls, it's finding all the information, and it's doing that largely on its own, right? It's the same thing with getting the images. I've embedded images in all of these. You'll see this. Here we go. Here's another one where it said, okay, let's start the game. I said, I want to play Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? And so it started it. It knows, because of what is defined in openapi.json, it knows that it needs a story ID and a user ID in order to use Start Game, right? So this, to me, this is actually part of what is so amazing about this era that we're in right now, is that we can build these types of experiences where our agents can actually discover exactly what's needed and then just do it for us. Okay, let's come back over to the code real quick. I did mention, so the openapi.json is super important. Another piece that I found that was extremely important, especially when using Claude Desktop, was the path of that file. So this v1 MCP openapi was extremely important because if it wasn't in that path, when Claude and other clients tried to connect to my SSE endpoint, they would fail, right, is what it came down to, unless I made it explicit, like I had to explicitly give them the path. So I originally had this all structured one way, and then I learned the error of my ways and learned, no, in fact, I need to ensure that I'm using this v1 MCP openapi. And funny enough, when I then delved deeper into the MCP documentation, I did find that. So I missed it first time and caused myself a little work. I went back, and then everything started working really well. One other piece I do want to point out here in the code is the system prompt. So you see this is actually part of my MCP server here. This ended up being also very important because in my case, again, I wanted to make this multimodal, and I wanted the images to automatically display. So I had to figure out how to get that not only in the OpenAPI spec, but also how to ensure that the agents understood that automatically without me having to tell them that, right? So this is where the system prompt came in. If you take a look, things like always display images automatically. What's the format of the images, right? And this was built to ensure that whether or not I was in Claude, Cursor, Warp, whatever, they all understood how to get those images and how to display them. So again, pretty important to have this piece. So anyway, let's get back to the game. So you can see here, I started playing with Warp. So we've got this, this kind of experience, this text-based experience. But then, as I mentioned a moment ago, ElevenLabs just recently released their conversational AI. And I decided to go ahead and take a look at this and see what would it take to implement and hook this up to my particular setup here. And let me tell you, it was super easy. I've said this multiple times. I was super impressed with ElevenLabs implementation. The docs were really solid. And in about an hour, I had this audio component that you see here on the right. As a matter of fact, why don't we go down? We're going to go down to our Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game. Why don't we go ahead and take a look? I'm just going to kind of move some things around, make this just a little bigger, right? So this little widget that you see here, this audio widget that I have, you'll notice that it is reflected over here in my components in this audio interaction.tsx. And in a previous video that I've made specifically on how to build out the ElevenLabs audio code components, you will see it's the exact same setup. All I needed to make this work is right here, this call. It's calling that route. We get our signed URL from that. And then you'll see there are some methods to implement, things like start conversation, stop conversation. They do have a mute functionality as well, which is super useful when you're going to have long running conversations, because inevitably someone is going to come in from the other room or something, and they're going to want to talk to you while you're trying to play a game. And if you can't mute, well, it leads to some very interesting conversations with your adventure agent. So having that mute capability is really nice. Again, this is all in the documentation. It was super easy to implement. Okay, so let's go ahead and have some fun. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to start playing this game, and let's go.
Welcome to MC Player One. Which game would you like to dive into, or would you like to create a new game to play?
Let's play the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game.
Marvelous choice. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a truly cosmic adventure.
Are you a new traveler through the stars, or would you like to continue your previous galactic journey?
No, I'm a new traveler.
Excellent. A fresh face, ready to explore the absurdities of the universe.
What name shall we record for your intergalactic passport, brave adventurer?
David.
Welcome, David, to the whimsical world of Journey to Magrathea.
Your adventure begins right now, and you find yourself in
Arthur's house.
It's a modest English home on the verge of demolition, surrounded by menacing bulldozers and the ever-present aroma of tea. The air, I must warn you, is thick with impending doom and bureaucracy. Here in Arthur's house, you'll notice a fresh towel and a soothing cup of tea. From here, you can venture
east
towards the local pub. Or if you're feeling adventurous and perhaps a little bit lucky, you could even try going
up
to what appears to be a Vogon shiphold. Would you like a quick list of commands that might help you on your travels, David?
Okay, so I'm going to end it right there, just that part of the conversation. Now, something you may have noticed that I was smirking at was the fact that it seems to have all these different voices that are coming into play. And so ElevenLabs does have this multi-voice support capability. Now, this is new. It was just in beta the other day. And in some cases, I think it works extremely well. And in some cases, as you heard, it can be kind of funny. I yet haven't figured out if this is my particular implementation of it. I have tried to give some instruction to the individual voices for what they are. My goal with this was to have it choose a narrator and then have some other voices for characters. And at times it's worked. It has been wonderful, right? It really keeps me in the story and engaged. And let's say there's a new character that's introduced, well, the character might have a different voice and it goes back to the narrator. Recently, though, it has been doing this thing where kind of like, depending on what it's doing, you can hear like the cardinal directions with one voice and this and that. So I'm still experimenting with this particular part of it and trying to really nail down how to make this better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over where I'm going to show you some fun scenes that came from my friend and I, Melissa, we were playing as well, kind of give you more of a feel for how this game works.
Welcome to MC Player One. Which game would you like to dive into, or would you like to create a new game to play?
Let's play a game where we explore the Titanic wreckage. We are in a submarine and we are trying to collect different treasures and artifacts from the wreckage.
There it is. Okay, go ahead and click on that. So you'll see that there's a bunch of artifacts that show up.
With a gentle push of the controls, your submersible glides away from the control room. But wait, Explorer Mel, a faint glimmer hints at something valuable below. As you secure the compass, a deep sense of accomplishment washes over you.
So this is a bit different from the normal types of videos that I record. I wanted to bring you on a bit more of a journey of me building out something a bit more real. Not just like an example application, but something I've actually personally put a lot of time into because I really do enjoy this whole adventure game and trying to explore the types of things we have available to us now that we can build out. I would love your feedback. What would you do differently here? Or what might you do the same? Or what would you like to see added when you play the game yourself? And with that, everybody, as always, thank you for watching. Happy coding. Take care.